This mini lecture is on the active reading stage of the reading process. And specifically, it will review some annotation strategies that you can use when reading a text in any class. Have you ever felt like this after reading for class? Maybe a little confused, or you're scratching your head because you just can't remember what you've read? I certainly have, especially when I was in grad school and had sometimes between 300 and 400 pages to read for class between Tuesday and Thursday. But what contributes to this feeling? It can be a lot of things. It can be the amount of reading we had, the type of reading we had. For me, it's often the distractions that are in my life that prevent me from truly focusing on what's in front of me. Whatever the factors are, there's definitely some strategies we can work through or learn to help us read better and retain more information. Last week, you looked at some resources that talked about pre-reading, active reading, and post-reading. Like I said, we'll be focusing on active reading the most today. However, you want to keep in mind the goals for pre-reading, why you do it, and the goals for post-reading as well, because all of this together gets packaged into a very useful reading process. Today, we'll be working on some things that help you build knowledge within the context for reading, to self-monitor your comprehension, and to make the content more memorable for recall and application. So for your tests or those essays you have to write. Annotating is one strategy for active reading, and I want to focus on that today because it's a record of what you're thinking while you're reading. So if you're like me and you have lots of distractions, you can keep these records as you read and come back to them later, and they'll help you remember the information. But annotating also makes reading what we call a multi-sensory process. There's a lot of research these days that says our brains learn differently than our grandparents' generation. And that has a lot to do with the technology we've grown up with. So if we can make reading multi-sensory, meaning incorporating more than one sense, we're more likely to remember the information. So instead of just reading words on a page, you can read words on a page and then you can talk about them. That incorporates two different senses. You can also read, talk about it, and record notes. That would be three senses. You could add in a fourth. You could draw pictures of what you've read. So you can see, you can hear, you can speak. All of these senses, the more you incorporate, the more likely your brain is to remember that information. And annotating makes the reading process multisensory. Let's look at this sample annotation. It's a student's, and it's on an article called "The Millennial Generation Lacks a Strong Work Ethic." And if the teacher asks the student to annotate it and bring those annotations to class, this is what you might see. But I want you to think about this. Is this a good annotation? Will the annotating here, the highlighting, help the student recall information maybe 2 days from now when he or she goes to class to have a discussion or to take a quiz? You can pause the video if you want to think about that. However, I'll say it's not really a very good annotation. If you look at the screen, you'll see that more sentences are highlighted in pink than actually not highlighted. So what's the highlighter supposed to do? Is it supposed to help you find the most important pieces of information? Well, if that's the case, it's not working so well. Your brain or your eyes can't look at this and quickly locate what you felt was the most important piece of information. So it might not be a very useful or effective annotation at this point. Here's another example, same article, different annotation. Would you consider this one better or worse? You can pause the presentation if you want to think about that for a second. I would say, though, there's a few obvious differences. Some words are circled. Well, that tells me the student thinks there's something important about these words, or maybe the student didn't know what these words meant. So I like that they're circled. However, there's no definitions written in the margin. So If I had circled these words on a Monday and looked up the definitions, I'm probably not going to remember those definitions by the time I get to class on Wednesday. I would highly recommend recording those definitions. There are, however, a few short notes in the margins, but I'm not sure that this annotation helps the student pick out the most important ideas either to recall later for a discussion or a quiz. So maybe a minor improvement, but overall still not the most effective annotation. Just a few reminders. Before you annotate something you're reading, you want to use those pre-reading strategies, all right, to help you get interested in a topic and understand the goals, like why you're reading. And I've listed here some of those pre-reading questions for you just as a refresher, so you can come back to this later if you'd like, before you start a reading assignment. Once you've done your pre-reading, you're ready to do the active reading, and in this case, so I'm going to give you 4 specific strategies in this presentation to focus on. I want you to use your highlighter, very sparingly though, just a little bit. When you read something, highlight maybe just the 1 or 2 sentences in that paragraph that express the main idea. How do you find the main idea though? Well, I like to read the paragraph and then say, so what? Or what was the purpose of that? And then I look for the sentence that can help me figure out the so what, maybe the importance of the paragraph, and I highlight that. But not too much highlighting, just the main ideas so that you can pick them out very easily and quickly later on. After you've put down your highlighter, you want to pick up your pen or your pencil. And in that same paragraph, you'll use the pen to underline the 1 or 2 examples of evidence you see in the paragraph. So if you figured out the main idea, you'll want to ask yourself, what are the supporting points? What are the evidence that proves that main idea true? What examples are being given? What does the author think is important for the reader to know? And you can underline those examples or evidence. A lot of times, teachers in class will say, okay, you found the main idea, but how do you know it's the main idea? Or what kind of logic or evidence does the author use? Your underlining is going to help you find that very quickly for those class discussions or to answer those post-reading questions. My third strategy is to circle those unfamiliar words, similar to what you saw in that sample annotation earlier. However, don't just circle them. You absolutely want to look up the definition, record it in the margin. Of course, you can use your good old-fashioned dictionary. I like to use an online dictionary to look up the word. And also, those online dictionaries will also have a button you can press to hear the pronunciation of a word, which makes me a little more confident to say those words in class. Now, the 4th strategy is to draw boxes around words that indicate an author's tone or stance. Another way to think about that is words that give you a clue about the author's opinion or attitude on a topic. So I like to think of them as like emotional words, sort of. There might be words that help you think the author is outraged about something she's read or very positive about something. Maybe the author has a sarcastic tone or is playful. Whatever it is, authors can have a lot of different opinions and attitudes, but drawing boxes around those words will help you get a better understanding of the author's perspective on an issue, which ultimately might help you figure out an author's message. Most of you are probably taking English 111 right now, and your teachers might be talking about rhetoric or persuasive messages. Tone's really important to figuring those things out. So this will help you out with your English 111 readings as well. A quick review. We're going to highlight 1 or 2 sentences in a paragraph that best express the main idea. Then we're going to use underlining for maybe the 2 examples or pieces of evidence or reasons that relate to that main idea or help explain that main idea. You're going to circle and define those unfamiliar words for yourself, and then draw boxes around words that give us a clue about the author's attitude, tone, or stance towards the topic he or she's writing about. So here's that same article, but annotated a bit differently. It's much more visual now, and it involved kind of marking up the text, which made it multisensory. You can see that some words are still circled, however, still not defined. Those definitions should be over here. But we see minimal highlighting in each paragraph or section where the student has located the main idea, and then the underlining is an example of those main ideas, okay, or evidence of that main idea. Some boxes have been used to indicate how the author feels about something. So if you read this sentence, it says millennials born in the 1980s and 90s are floundering in a hellish job market. Hellish gives us an idea of how the author feels about the job market. Hellish indicates it's a pretty tough job market out there. So millennials are having a hard time finding a job. All right, and you can kind of keep going and see how the student had used these annotations in every paragraph. Now, when that student gets to class and the teacher says, what's the evidence in the third paragraph that supports the main idea? The students can look at exactly what he or she has underlined and be able to raise their hand and answer that question in class. Next, you've got your text marked up. The next stage to annotating a text is to paraphrase in your own words what you've read. If you can explain something in your own words, you're much more likely to remember that information and to use it. I like to think of it as turning to my friend at the coffee shop or out to dinner, and she says, hey, Rachel, what did you read for class today? And I just start to talk it out and explain it. So to paraphrase, I do that first. I talk it out. Then I record those notes in the margin. So they're my words to explain the ideas I've just read. That's the kind of next level of comprehending info and retaining it. So I hope that as you take this class and your others and you have readings to do, you'll start applying these 4 strategies: highlighting, underlining, circling, and defining and boxing words, and then recording your own notes. I hope you start to use those things to become more effective and strategic readers, and ultimately do really well on all your tests, quizzes, and essays.